welcome to ShakeTube episode 12. This is going to be my third video this week, which I think ties my previous record. I had a video on Sunday with a review of V for Vendetta, and then on Tuesday I had a tipsy version of the Partner's Best Friends tag with my fiance that took forever to edit, but I'm super happy with it. It might be one of my favorite videos that I've done in the last couple months, so check those out if you are still craving some Brian's Book bashing after this. But today it's going to be slightly different for ShakeTube, mainly because I actually saw the play that we're talking about today live on the stage 2 weeks ago, and I really only have a limited time to record here today. So we're going to be talking about what it was like to see King Lear on the stage. I've thought about this when I've seen other productions of other works on the stage or on screen. When you see a particular production, you start to think about all of the other possibilities of how it could have been done because you see one very specific iteration in that moment. And so when we got there, one of the things that stood out was the fact that the stage was going to be very minimalist. There were only two columns that were standing up there on the stage, one toppled over, and some dirt spread across various parts of the stage, and some bigger piles were seen, and we saw that those were used for other particular scenes. But I was actually really happy about that minimalist set design because as I've learned more about Shakespeare plays and the time that they were first performed, you realize that that was the way it was done at that time. The stages weren't very ornate. Maybe the building was more fancy for its time, but the stage itself was pretty simple, and the audience really had to do a lot of the work to imagine the various settings, and the actors had to use very vivid imagery to make them see all of those various settings as they were acting out the various scenes. And like I said, though I did like the minimalist set design for this production, I think it would be interesting to see another production of King Lear later on where they did use a lot of props and various set designs for the different scenes because it would really change the whole experience overall. But one thing that was so cool about this production is though they used that minimalist set design, they had a very complex lighting design, which seems like it'd be a weird combination, but they really pulled it off here. When I looked up to the top of the stage, I saw just rows and rows and rows of these various lights, and I saw how they used all of them to add effects to each scene. If it was later in the day, they used a lot of darker oranges and yellows to portray a sunset, or if it was darker, they would use blues and shut a lot of them off to make it really feel like it was nighttime or dusk. And then one scene in particular really used the lights to great effect. It's about halfway through the play here. It's when King Lear is outside in the storm, and it was mind-blowing how they pulled this off. And it's obviously not something that is directed here in the actual script because they didn't have lights that they could do this with. But as King Lear was outside, there was thunder booming all around you. These lights were flashing on and off all over the place, and it was very chaotic. But then when King Lear spoke, everything stopped. The sound cut out, the lights started to flash really slowly, and everyone else on stage totally froze, and it was very surreal. It added a lot of impact because of that contrast, and it was such a powerful scene because King Lear is talking about him really diving down into this crazy state of mind. He kind of realizes that it's happening, and it was just so powerful because you had to pay attention. You couldn't just gloss over for those particular pieces of speech. It was something that they wanted you to hone in on, and it was right before the intermission, which made it even more impactful. One thing that can also obviously be very different from production to production is the cast. Now, Jamie and I knew the actor that played King Lear. She actually knew him a lot better than I did. I had met him at a wedding earlier on that year, and he had mentioned that he was an actor, and it just kind of worked out perfectly that he was putting on this production because obviously I'm in the middle of reading a ton of Shakespeare plays, and so I wanted to go and experience it in this setting, but he was incredible. King Lear would be an incredibly hard role to pull off because not only do you have to be very regal at the beginning because he is in his court and hasn't started to devolve into madness. He is the king at the beginning, but then you have to make that transition, and it has to be very gradual over time because it's not just like, boom, King Lear's crazy. He starts to take these steps farther and farther down, and this actor in particular did that wonderfully. The character who played Edmund was also fantastic. I just know after reading the play that I probably wouldn't have liked Edmund as a character as much if I had read the play first, but seeing this particular actor perform Edmund with his own spin on it made me like the character a lot more, even though he was obviously not the best character as far as morals go, but he added a lot of attitude to the role and added a lot of great emphasis to the lines where even lines that I wouldn't have laughed at in here, I laughed at when he spoke them because he was just so convincing with it. Also, a lot of times when I read background characters in these plays, I just gloss over their lines, but there were a few actors in this production that really sold their role, and it made it so much more fun because even though they were unnamed, they left their mark on the production as a whole because they would be extra sassy or something in their line, and so you would get a little bit of a chuckle out of it, or they'd be very dramatic and really sell that part, and those are scenes that I continue to remember even today. But on that point, the likability of the characters really are in the actors' hands, and in particular, the two sisters that were not Cordelia, were not that great of actresses, and it was okay because I don't like those characters. They're obviously really terrible to the king, but even the actresses themselves, I just wasn't really sold on their roles. I don't think that they were as convincing. They weren't as realistic with their lines, and so it didn't sell me as much on them. And I think that it does make a difference because, like I said, with Edmund, he's not a great character either, but that actor really made him a great role. And so that's something that I find very interesting about seeing a lot of these plays on the stage is you really have to surrender yourself over to whoever's portraying the various roles. And so in that regard, it's probably better to see some of these plays multiple times to get different experiences because you might find some attributes of certain characters more appealing in other productions because the actor did it that much better. I will say I was more confused on the plot points of King Lear at the beginning of the play, and I think that I just got so used to having a lot of resources in the various editions that I've been reading, like in the Folger's Shakespeare Library editions, there's always chapter summaries at the very beginning, and they also have some other resources on the left side of each page where they would define a lot of these words that had changed meaning over time, or they would explain some of the references that were happening within the actual play itself. And so without that, I did find myself kind of lost at some points, and also some of the characters were getting confusing to me. But reading it afterward, it really cleared it up. And so I think for myself, even though I've heard from so many people that it's so much better to see the plays because you'll be able to understand a lot better, I think for me, I would need to read them first before I actually go see the production. And it was nice that I got a chance to experiment in this way because after ShakeTube's over, I will have read quite a few of the plays, and so that won't be as much of a problem for me going forward. But I did find that interesting because I had to ask my fiance and also our friend that went with us some clarifying questions during intermission, and I just found myself out of my element in that sense, but I think that that's okay. Overall, the play was great. It was so complex with so many different forces trying to manipulate the events, and so it didn't just stay with a linear storyline. There was a lot of various elements that were going to affect that story, and so I appreciated that about it. When I actually had read one of those vague summaries that you see about productions online when we were looking at tickets, it had said something about a redemption, and so I was expecting King Lear to really rise back up, and then I got to the end, and obviously it's just like the worst possible ending, and so that really shocked me as well. And I think that that was fun too, because like I said, if I would have had these chapter summaries, I would have seen some of the plot points spoiled before that, and so being able to just sit there once it was over and being like, oh my god, that was awful, was a lot of fun. Because I had such a good time seeing King Lear on the stage, my ear has been to the ground looking for any more productions of Shakespeare going on. I actually have a coworker that's doing one of the plays that I hadn't heard of before. I can't remember the name, and so I might be seeing that as well here in the next couple of weeks. But I really do recommend anybody out there, especially all of you ShakeTubers, to go out and see a stage production of one of these plays. I think it'll really change your perspective for the better. And so with that, that's King Lear. Hope you all had a good time reading it this week. We have 3 more plays to go, which is mind-blowing because when I was looking back at the first video of ShakeTube, that was all the way back at the end of August, which is nuts. So stay strong. We got this. This has been super fun so far, but let's sprint to the finish line. All the same, thanks for watching this week. See you next Friday.